Something happened under Blind Frog Ranch that the crew tried to keep quiet until now. Moments ago, Duane Ollinger finally confirmed the truth about the breathing sound the team captured deep beneath the property. This wasn't an animal, it wasn't an echo, and it wasn't a malfunction. Duane says it was deliberate, rhythmic, and coming from somewhere in the cavern system where no living thing should be. The crew froze when they heard it. Cameras picked it up, and what they found afterward proves something alive is moving under the ranch, and it's getting closer. Before we break down exactly what Duane revealed, why the team panicked, and what this discovery means, make sure to subscribe, because what you're about to hear changes everything at Blind Frog Ranch. It started on a calm evening, one of those rare nights at Blind Frog Ranch when the air felt still, and the crew finally believed things might go according to plan. Duane and Chad had been running routine checks near the primary cavern entrance, focusing on the expanding shaft system that had recently shown signs of new instability. Nothing unusual appeared on the monitors, no electromagnetic spikes, no subterranean shifts, just the constant drip of groundwater echoing below. But that quiet didn't last. At 9:17 p.m., sound tech Marlin noticed a strange fluctuation on his audio feed, an unnatural dip in the background noise, like the environment itself had suddenly taken a breath. He adjusted the gain, thinking it was interference. Instead, the waveform sharpened, and then he heard it clearly through his headset. A slow, heavy exhale rising out of the darkness beneath them. He replayed it twice to make sure he wasn't imagining it. The pattern was unmistakable. Something down there was drawing air into massive lungs and releasing it with a weight that sent a faint vibration through the headphones. It wasn't wind, it wasn't airflow shifting through the tunnels. It had rhythm, timing, volume. It sounded alive. Marlin called Duane over immediately. As soon as Duane crouched beside the equipment and put on the headset, his expression shifted. His eyebrows dropped, his posture stiffened. He lowered the headset and asked if anyone else was in the lower shaft. Chad confirmed the area was empty. No crew, no machinery running, no airflow systems active. That's when the second breath came through. Longer, deeper, so heavy it rattled the metal casing of the audio rig. Everyone nearby heard it without headphones this time. A deep, resonant "hoo" that rolled up the shaft and spilled into the open air. The sound froze the entire team. Chad stepped back instinctively. A cameraman whispered, "Is something alive down there?" Another crew member immediately reached for the drone controls, desperate to get eyes into the black void. Duane didn't move. His eyes were locked on that opening in the earth, like he was staring into the throat of something vast. "It's close," he muttered, barely above a whisper. Because the breathing wasn't coming from deep within the cavern, it was rising from a point just out of sight, inches beyond the drop-off, as if something massive was standing directly beneath them, waiting to be noticed. The moment that second breath rolled up out of the shaft, Chad Ollinger reacted before anyone else. He took 2 steps back, eyes locked on the dark opening, his flashlight trembling just slightly in his hand. Chad is usually the steady one, the voice of reason when the ranch does its worst, but this sound hit him differently. It wasn't just the volume, it wasn't even the depth, it was the intent behind it, like whatever was below them was aware of their presence and exhaling directly toward them. Chad raised his radio and called for all crew to freeze positions, but the radio crackled, distorted, and then went dead. No connection. The timing was too perfect. Comms failing exactly as the breathing intensified sent a wave of unease through everyone. One cameraman whispered, "Something's interfering with us," and glanced nervously at the sky, expecting electromagnetic distortion. But the drone feed was working fine. Only the radios were compromised. Then came the third breath. This one wasn't loud. It was closer. A slow, drawn-in inhale that vibrated the loose gravel at the lip of the shaft. Chad turned his head sharply, scanning the perimeter. "Is something crawling up?" he whispered to Duane. But Duane didn't answer. He was staring into the black void, shoulders tense, as if bracing for something none of them were prepared to see. A crew member swept his thermal camera over the shaft entrance. Nothing. No heat signatures, no movement, just a cold, dead gap. Another checked the air pressure monitor. No spikes, no changes. Everything pointed to a normal environment, except the fact that something down there was breathing like it had lungs the size of a bear. Chad crouched beside the edge, shining his light downward. The beam seemed to vanish into darkness much sooner than it should have, as if the air itself swallowed the light. "That's not normal," he said, his voice cracked. Chad doesn't scare easily, but the realization that something invisible, possibly intelligent, was only a few feet away made his nerves spark with adrenaline. Then something happened that made several crew members step back at once. The fourth breath wasn't like the others. It came with a faint, almost imperceptible hum, a vibration layered beneath the exhale, like a low-frequency growl or a vocalization masked under the airflow. It was subtle, but it was unmistakably directed. It felt like it was aimed at Chad specifically, responding to his proximity. Chad jerked upright. "It's not just breathing," he said, stepping backward. "It's aware we're here." That sentence changed the energy instantly. The entire crew shifted from curious investigators to people realizing they might be standing above something that didn't just exist beneath the ranch, but interacted with whoever got close. Duane put a hand on Chad's shoulder, pulling him back from the edge. "We're dealing with something alive," he said quietly, "and it knows we found it." While the crew scrambled to steady themselves, audio engineer Marlin was already pulling the raw recording into his laptop. His hands moved fast, but his face showed the kind of confusion that only happens when training runs headfirst into something that shouldn't exist. He isolated the waveform, those long, dragging breaths, and zoomed in. What he saw made him sit back in his chair. Human breathing follows a recognizable pattern: a rise, a plateau, and a fall. Animals have their own signatures depending on lung capacity, nasal passages, and body mass. But the waveform on Marlin's screen didn't match either. The inhale wasn't smooth. It was perfectly uniform, like air being pulled in through a single massive cavity rather than lungs. And the exhale? It had a resonance spike that shouldn't exist unless the sound was traveling through a body cavity far larger than anything native to Utah. "This isn't a person," Marlin said quietly, "but it's not an animal either." He played the audio again, this time slowing it to half speed. The breath deepened into a monstrous, cavernous tone, so wide and heavy that it made the inside of the tent vibrate. But beneath the exhale, hidden under the natural frequencies, was something that froze him completely. A rhythmic pulsing, not a heartbeat, something stranger. A bass-like flutter at perfect intervals, as if the breathing creature had multiple resonant chambers inside its body. Chad leaned over his shoulder. Could it be airflow through the tunnels? Marlin shook his head. Airflow is chaotic. This is controlled, deliberate. He ran a spectral analysis next. If the sound had been an echo, wind, or vibration, it would show scattered data across the spectrum. Instead, the breathing displayed a narrow, exact frequency range, almost like a voice. Not speech, but the foundation of speech. A kind of pre-vocalization, as if whatever made the sound had the physical ability to mimic communication, but wasn't using it yet. Then came the moment that made Marlin's stomach drop. He compared the waveform to known wildlife: bears, cougars, elk, even bison. Nothing came close. But when he overlaid it onto the harmonic signature of a human breath scaled up 4 or 5 times, the match was unnervingly close. The creature wasn't an animal. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a geological anomaly. It was something with a respiratory system similar to a human, but on a scale that shouldn't exist beneath Blind Frog Ranch. Marlin looked up at Duane, pale and visibly shaken. "Whatever's down there," he said quietly, "it's big, and it's built like us." The analysis was enough to rattle the entire crew, but no one felt the weight of it more than Duane Ollinger. Blind Frog Ranch wasn't just a project to him, this was his land, his responsibility, and whatever was breathing under it had now crossed the line from mystery to threat. So when the discussion turned to sending someone down the shaft to confirm the source, Duane didn't hesitate. He clipped into the harness before anyone could argue. Chad protested immediately. "Dad, we don't know what's down there." Duane tightened the straps anyway. "That's exactly why I'm going." The descent was slow, controlled, and eerily silent. As the team lowered him deeper into the shaft, the air temperature dropped noticeably. Duane's headlamp illuminated the walls, slick with moisture, coated in clay, and scarred with fresh gouges he didn't remember seeing before. Long, smooth indentations traced the rock as if something enormous had dragged itself through recently. Halfway down, the rope trembled in the crew's hands. Not from Duane, from below. "Stop lowering!" Chad yelled. The breathing rose again, this time so loud that Duane felt it reverberate through his chest. The exhale rolled past him like a warm, stagnant wind, carrying the unmistakable sense of proximity. Whatever was down there, it was close enough to reach out if it wanted to. Duane steadied himself, shining his light directly into the dark. The beam caught nothing at first, just endless black. Then, for a split second, the light caught movement, not a shape, not an animal. A shift, like a mass pulling itself backward into a deeper chamber. "Pull me up," Duane whispered into the radio. His voice was tight, controlled. Not afraid, but aware. When he reached the surface, he didn't say a word for several minutes. Finally, he removed his harness, looked at the crew, and said, "There's something alive down there, and it's watching us." After Duane's ascent, the crew gathered around the shaft in tense silence. No one wanted to admit it out loud, but every person standing there felt the same thing, that whatever was beneath them wasn't just breathing, it was moving. And it wasn't moving randomly, it was moving with purpose. To regain some sense of control, Chad suggested they inspect the lower entrance to the cavern system, a narrow, muddy channel where groundwater seeped out after storms. If something large had recently shifted within the tunnels, it might have left physical traces there. They didn't have to search long. Just 30 yards from the main dig site, the mud told a story no one wanted to read. Sediment that had been undisturbed for years was now churned, smeared, and split open in deep grooves. The muddy banks were pushed outward, as if something massive had pressed against them while squeezing through the passage. Charlie crouched down for a closer look. "These aren't animal tracks," he said quietly. "Animals don't leave impressions like this." He pointed to a smooth, curved indentation, nearly 3 feet long, that tapered at one end. It looked like the imprint of a limb, but not one belonging to any creature known to Utah. The mud showed upward drag, meaning whatever made the mark had pulled itself out of the tunnel rather than stepped into it. Then they saw the water. The normally still pool outside the cavern mouth was gently rippling, not from wind, not from runoff, but from something disturbing the water from inside the tunnel. Small waves pulsed outward at perfectly timed intervals, the exact rhythm of the breathing they'd recorded earlier. Chad's jaw tightened. "It's moving around down there!" Charlie dipped a thermal probe into the water. The display flashed an irregular, fluctuating heat signature, not warm enough to be machinery, not cold enough to be natural subterranean water. Something about the temperature reading suggested mass, shifting, retreating. Duane stared at the disturbed mud in dead silence. It wasn't just the size of the tracks that bothered him. It was the direction. Every deep groove, every smear, every drag mark led toward the main shaft, straight toward the place where Duane had descended earlier, as if the creature had been moving in his direction right before the crew heard it breathing. Duane finally spoke, voice low and steady. "It's not trapped down there, it's moving freely," and that meant one terrifying possibility. It could choose when to come up. With the mud tracks confirming movement inside the tunnels, the team shifted focus to gathering thermal data, anything that could give a clearer picture of what exactly was navigating beneath the ranch. Charlie Snyder, the crew's most experienced tech operator, retrieved the long-range thermal imager and positioned himself directly above the cavern mouth. Charlie was calm, methodical, and rarely rattled. But the moment the device powered on, his face changed. At first, the screen displayed the expected blues and purples of cold rock and water. Everything appeared normal, quiet, still, empty. But as Charlie adjusted the sensitivity and increased the exposure, a shape flickered at the bottom of the display. He leaned closer, thinking it was a glitch. Then it appeared again, clearer this time. A heat mass, large and elongated, resting against the cavern wall. Charlie froze. It wasn't a defined shape, no obvious head, limbs, or body outline. Instead, it resembled a long, coiled form, pulsing with internal warmth. The creature, or whatever it was, seemed to have multiple hotspots distributed along its length, like several warm chambers connected to a single body. No animal in the region had a thermal signature even remotely similar. Charlie whispered, "This thing's alive, and it's huge!" Before anyone could react, the mass shifted, slowly, deliberately. The hotspot elongated and then contracted, as if the creature were expanding its body to inhale and releasing after. The thermal signature breathed, but the most chilling part came next. The creature moved laterally along the cavern wall. Without lifting off the surface, the heat signature slid across the rock as if the creature had the ability to adhere to it, clinging like a massive biological shadow. Charlie backed away from the monitor. "It's climbing," he said, his voice cracking for the first time. As the mass approached the vertical shaft that led upward toward the crew's position, the thermal display flickered, then went black. Not because the device lost power, because something hot, something alive, had moved directly beneath the sensor, overwhelming it. Charlie stepped back, pale. "It's not just moving," he whispered. "It's coming up." The moment the thermal scan went dark, a heavy silence fell over the crew. No one spoke, no one moved. They all stood around the cavern entrance like people waiting for something to emerge. Then, without warning, the breathing returned, louder than before, deeper, and unmistakably closer. It didn't echo this time, it resonated. The exhale rolled up through the ground beneath their feet, vibrating the loose stones and rattling the metal survey equipment. Duane snapped his head toward the shaft, eyes wide. Chad reached instinctively for his father, pulling him back from the edge. Even Charlie, normally unshakable, took several steps away from the cavern mouth. A fifth breath followed, slow, dragging, almost wet. This time, the sound didn't come from deep below. It came from the mid-level chamber, a space far too narrow for anything of that size to fit through, unless the creature could compress itself, flattening its body like an enormous, living ribbon. "It's climbing," Charlie said quietly. But the real terror was in what came next. The breathing shifted direction. Instead of rising vertically from inside the shaft, the exhale now emerged from the side wall, through fissures and cracks, where sound should never travel. It didn't just sound close. It sounded like it was moving laterally through the rock, following them, tracking them from inside the earth. The crew backed away in unison. Then something new happened. A second breath, higher pitched, faster, almost overlapping the first. "Is that two?" Chad whispered, voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, the ground beneath the shaft trembled, not violently but rhythmically. A deep, pulsing thump that synced with the breathing, like the creature was anchoring itself or pushing upward against the rock. Duane's expression hardened. He had seen enough. "Everyone back to the vehicle, now!" As they retreated, the final sound chased them through the darkness. A long, drawn-in inhale that seemed to stretch across the entire cavern system. It wasn't random. It wasn't instinctive. It felt purposeful, like the creature was smelling for them, memorizing them, choosing which one it wanted to follow. The crew didn't run at first. They moved quickly, but cautiously, eyes locked on the shaft as they backed away. But as soon as they reached the first equipment trailer, the ground beneath Blind Frog Ranch gave a low, rolling shudder. It wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't collapsing rock. It was rhythmic, almost like the cavern itself was reacting to their movement. Charlie spun toward the monitors. The seismograph needle wasn't spiking randomly. It was pulsing in a steady pattern, 5 seconds apart. Every pulse matched the breathing they had just heard. It was as if the creature underground wasn't just alive. It was moving against the earth, pushing its mass through the tunnels with a force powerful enough to register like heartbeat-sized tremors. Chad grabbed his camera, pointing it back toward the main shaft. A thin plume of dust drifted upward, not from wind, but from displacement. Something was shifting the interior. "It's coming closer," Chad said, barely above a whisper. The crew made the call to retreat fully to the trucks, but as they crossed the open field, the lights from the generator flickered violently. For First a quick flutter, then a full blackout. All at once, the ranch was swallowed in pitch darkness. No ambient glow, no horizon light, just a suffocating black silence. Then the cavern hummed. A deep, resonant vibration rolled across the property, shaking the loose dirt and buzzing through the soles of their boots. The hum wasn't mechanical. It carried texture, almost like a low vocalization buried beneath layers of stone. A sound that didn't belong in nature. A sound that felt directed. Charlie stumbled back. "It's responding to us leaving," he said. Another tremor followed, stronger, closer. This time the hum rose in pitch, warbling like whatever was beneath them was exerting itself, pressing upward or dragging its body along the tunnel walls. Duane shouted for everyone to get inside the trucks immediately. As the doors slammed shut and engines roared to life, the final tremor hit, sharp, focused, and directly beneath the main shaft. Dust exploded upward, rocks clattered down the hillside, and for a single moment the breathing returned, not from the cavern, not from the shaft, from somewhere out in the open field behind them, as if the creature had found another way up. Back at base, Duane finally said what no one wanted to admit. The breathing wasn't an echo, a creature, or a natural phenomenon. It was intelligent, mobile, and using the tunnels to track them. Reviewing the data, he confirmed the truth. Whatever lived beneath Blind Frog Ranch wasn't alone. And it wasn't confined. "It's moving freely," Duane said quietly, "and now it knows we're here."